And coming in and doing some great co-hosting for me tonight is my good buddy Jeff Dismukes, who, with the absence of Dr. Larry Bookman, who's been gone to parts unknown for how long, we don't know. Right?
It has been a while.
At some point, he's going to show back up and demand to get back on here. I just know that's going to happen.
Equal time?
Just any time for Larry, Dr. Bookman, I'm sorry. So it's good to have you with us. We have a lot of news. There has been a lot of news. And
yes,
we'll cover a few topics tonight. By the way, this is didn't we figure out the 78th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy?
I
believe that is so.
Day.
The day that
big day in my family.
Normandy.
And
which is, by the way, which a lot of people, a whole generation, only know it from, right? Only know it from Tom Hanks movies.
Right.
So that's the way it goes, Good to have you with us, Jeff Dismukes, and all our folks at News 9, News on 6. Well, I've got a clip we'll play in just a few minutes with has no visual at all on it about invasion. We're sitting here tonight and we're talking across my platform, News 9, News on 6 platform, and then on the social media channels, and we've got YouTube and Amazon and what else we got? Apple, right? There's all these platforms that we all have now. Plus, we put portions on LinkedIn, we put portions on Instagram, all of this stuff. Back then, you had John Ford making movies in World War II,
right?
And then you've got there was very little media, but audio was big, and people could hear back then in terms of what was going on. So we'll play a little snippet of that. Pretend we're in the back, way back, and fight for freedom. That was fight against tyranny and fight against, the Axis powers, which are trying to subjugate the entire world. 78 years later, we still have evil in this world, huh?
Right. Sad.
So we have a couple of issues that we'll talk about this evening besides evil in the world. We've got, and maybe some people will equate this, but nonetheless, we've got Storm Jones in a few minutes, pre-recorded. Of course, federal judge has given the go-ahead to resume the death penalty in Oklahoma. He's specifically, Judge Friot, I believe is the way you pronounce that. If not, apologies to Your Honor. Specifically okayed the cocktail that we use to carry out those executions. Also this weekend, there was an interesting development. There was a story I saw on News 9 this weekend about a surprise visit by health officials to the Oklahoma County Detention Center, which was not a favorable one. And on top of that, it's not unnoticed that we're 22 days away from an election. There's the primary election in Oklahoma, but in Oklahoma County, it's going to be about that facility, about building a new facility. And there does not appear to be organized effort. Some protesters running against it, but virtually no corporations, trade groups, anything like that are opposed to this. And you're wondering, was that done on purpose? If not, I think the question is, well, did you think out what would happen if you do something like that? We're going to talk with Commissioner Mon about that. Also, there has been we've seen a real rush to judgment. I've had a lot of people who love journalism who've contacted me and said, what is with this going on right now in Oklahoma? This situation with the tourism audit, which a lot of folks believe that the media has hyped this and has really been unfair, at least to Swadley's folks, saying they haven't had their day in court. They've been presumed to be guilty. In fact, some media outlets are calling it the Swadley's scandal. And not that I know that there's a scandal yet, not that I know they've done anything wrong. 3 weeks ago, we had your vote counts. The majority floor leader said, nothing's been proven at all. Nobody's been accused of doing anything wrong. There's been some stories that don't look great, but given the context that you only have whenever a few of the folks, and most of the folks aren't talking, right? It's civil, it's criminal investigations. You've got a House committee, but you don't have to go back as far as Governor Keating to find out that there can be some of these issues that are just completely bogus. and made up from politics. So Richard Morissette is going to drop in, and he's had, as a Democrat, I think he was on 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said, it doesn't look great. But then he also brought up today, he goes, at this rush to judgment and this convicting people in the press, where you're not supposed to do that, by the way, if you're legal folks, well, there's ABA Code of Conduct 3.6 ABC. I know it because I teach it. And so just so happens that's happened over the last 25 years. I've seen this, and I've seen some violations there in terms of what a person gets or needs to have a fair trial, a fair and impartial jury, Jeff. I believe that's the way they put it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk with Richard a little bit about that. We'll start off this evening with the fact that since you were last here, we didn't have many episodes last week. Tulsa has happened. Taft has happened. We've seen more, 246 quote unquote mass shootings. I'm not sure what the definition of a mass shooting is, Jeff. What the number is 3
to 4 individuals, isn't it?
Okay. Sounds good to me in terms of the definition. But so many more. And the CBS Evening News tonight was saying that the Senate, where it has to happen, perhaps expanded backgrounds, perhaps raising the age, doing something about the red flag laws, which Oklahoma has already presumptively passed laws against red flag laws in Oklahoma. There's also another one that was missed this weekend. If you saw Your Vote Counts, a little known story this weekend that's pretty much been missed by the media so far, and that is that the administration is threatening states that have passed these transgender bathroom bills. If they don't do what the administration wants, they may attack these states or try to impact these states by withholding USDA resources. That means food. And so there's been a lawsuit threatened by the South Dakota governor or North Dakota. I forget where Christine Nome is from, one of the Dakotas. But as it was pointed out to me this weekend, there's 17 states they could go after, and Oklahoma would be one of them. So there's so much news going on. Well, let's start with Jeff Dismukes, with the communications guru for many years. You're a little kid, you started there.
Yeah.
And, this is the way it always happens. It's just like a songbook. There's a mass shooting. There's discussion about something must be done. And then nothing happens until the next one. So People of goodwill can decide what needs to be done. But if you get away from the gun thing and go into the mental health aspect, the behavioral health aspect of this, after this time, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about the behavioral health aspect as far as the impact on families, individuals across Oklahoma. Certainly, I worry about our healthcare providers and the stresses that they've been going through with COVID. Now added pressure from this, all the discussion that is out there. Really, it's just a groundswell of information that's coming after everybody, and it's hard to sift through it without having anxiety from it. So I think one of the important things that I want people to be aware of is the fact that the department is working with our providers, and our providers in Tulsa rallied around the city, the St. Francis community, and others to help address issues when this occurred. But there are 2 numbers to call. In Tulsa, you actually call the COPES line, 918-744-4800. That's 918-744-4800 for individuals who are experiencing stress and anxiety because of these issues, needing to talk to someone. It's important to reach out. And then statewide, 1-800-522-9054. That's the reach out hotline that we've operated through the department for many years. 1-800-522-9054. And you are able to reach out and talk to somebody about the stressors you might be feeling from this. Scott put up for a second the Lifeline, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Again, another great number to call, 800-522, let me get the number again. Sorry, 800-273-TALK, which is 800-273-8255. I have too many of these 800 numbers running in my head, Scott. But
there's a lot
good,
of them.
Good news is we're going to have 988 a little later this summer, which will be a number to call for anyone to call for any of this type of information. Just reaching out for help with crisis situations. whatever the needs are, even to get appointments to mental health services in your community later this summer, 988. And we'll talk about that when that line is up and live. But I do think it's important to reach out to the families there. Certainly discussion, you always hear this discussion when we start, if we have these types of events, people go to, we've talked about this before. I believe people try to find a really simple answer to address this issue. It's horrific. How do you make sense of it? We want to make sense of it. So we start looking for reasons. Mental health is what we talk about. I want to reiterate, while it is possible for this to happen, and it has happened because of mental health issues before, that predominantly isn't what we see as far as violence. There's a great report by the Healthy Minds Policy Initiative in Tulsa. Healthy Minds Policy Initiative, you can access them online. We've had Zach Stoikoff on air with us a few times. They have a report about this. I think it's an interesting read for people so that you can actually see what the statistics say clinically, what you would expect with these types of illnesses and when that might be involved. I purposely haven't talked about this much since the shooting because of the stigma that's around this. And these aren't issues in these cases where we're looking at known mental health reasons for something occurring. I'm not saying that mental health, again, can't occur and contribute to factors, but these are usually very complex issues. There are many, many factors we can be talking about. And not to play politics today, but I saw an incredible statement put out by Matthew McConaughey today that popped up, which I thought was very reasonable, talking about looking at all the many different things to discuss. And I think that's going to, whenever you have these events, I do think it's important to be rational and to discuss these matters. I know that our elected officials are talking about these issues. I'm confident that that is occurring and that they are trying to figure things out. The politics do get in the way, and it causes us great angst. So again, it's important while we go through this to try to, you talked about this a little bit in your opening. We were talking about other issues that are being covered. It's important to sit back, look at the information that's coming in, and try to filter through this as best we can, and to work to make changes. And if that means investing more in behavioral health services, investing more in school safety, whatever the issue is, let's talk about it and try to progress.
Understand there's some money for school safety in the federal bill they're talking about. So
yeah, well, and the legislature did some great things during this last session around school safety by working to increase partnership with local school districts and their behavioral health providers, working more to make those crisis services available, identify issues that might pop up early so that we can link not just children, but their families also to needed services. So this is definitely something that we've been discussing here in Oklahoma.
Which makes for a good segue into what happened over the weekend in terms of the State Department of Health doing I don't know if the term is surprise, but it was an inspection a few days ago. Not sure of the time, except I'm sure the report came out this weekend, and it was not good. The headlines were basically, well, there's only 8 people in there. I don't know that we have all the details. I do know that what happened with people that called me and told me about the story that was done by News 9, and I'm sure other outlets in town, was that really, 3 weeks before an election, dealing with the bond issue. Now, it's important to note that what we don't have is the sort of sometimes opposition to these sorts of things. Usually will be organizations, groups, trade groups, causes. There hasn't been much of that. There's been a few folks that have taken umbrage with this. They don't want the thing to be built, the new jail to be built. They have to extend this bond in the 27th primary, or it's not going to go forward. I think this is probably accurate. You tell me if I'm accurate about this, Jeff. But basically, all people that work in behavioral health have said you can't use that current building and get anything done. Okay?
Yeah.
And that would be, and remember, we have 2 Republican commissioners, 1 Democrat commissioner. But from what I've seen, most of what I would call responsible organizations dealing with mental health, behavioral health, justice reform, recognized leaders in those fields have said got to do something different. The building won't work. So this story came out. There were some people that said, well, this may be timed. I don't know. I don't know if it's politics or election or whatever. If it was timed to be impactful on this election, the question then becomes, well, if you have a bad health report, and the place has got bed bugs and things like that, does that help the cause of voting no? Which it seems to me like that's a stretch. You might want to think that one through. If that's what happened. In the meantime, I reached out to the commissioners, reached out to the sheriff. Sheriff couldn't appear, but I got Commissioner Mon said he could. And the basic thrust was, is this going to have anything to do? Even if it's, let's say this is just, the timing is not suspicious, it's just incidental to what goes on every day. How is this going to impact this election, June the 27th? And here we have three sound bites from him on this. Here's the first question is, what does this mean? So your thoughts about the timing of this, what it says, and how it impacts the election of the bond election in less than about 3 weeks now.
Well, first off, I always want to say we welcome these inspections. They have been a matter of routine over the past few years. The timing of this is a little suspect, but it doesn't really change anything that they do come in periodically. They usually find something similar to what they found, and that's not altogether surprising. We in Oklahoma County tend to deal with more than, say, the other, at least more than, 70 of the other counties throughout the state in terms of the type of inmate that we often incarcerate. Largely those come from areas where we suffer from them having bed bugs on them when they come into the facility, and with other number of medical issues that come along with them. So a lot of times that's from the vagrant community. Other times it's a matter of that we have some that are just in general poor health. But having said all that, I just want to say that it doesn't excuse that some of those things are the case. We constantly work on it. We're working on it again. And we're also trying to make sure that we can get everything that the health department asks. But in the past, we have also rejected some of their assertions and said that's just not the way we have found them to be. So it's a combination of, things that you think are fair or not fair. But in any of our responses, we document what we think is not fair. And in this case, with the timing that you mentioned, it was rather suspicious that, a ready-made protest at the jail came within basically hours of the news story. So that was suspicious.
Hard to argue with that, right?
Right.
All right. And then we went a little further. I mean, forget about the suspicion part of it, how does it impact the election?
Well, number one, I obviously come back. I should say at first that I never make excuses. There's always room for improvement. We take these reports serious, and I'll be sure to make my communication with my appointee, the jail trust, Ben Brown. We communicate all the time. We're going to see what areas we can improve upon with this report. But exactly to your point, Scott, this is exactly why we need a new building. Those that are criticizing this proposal say, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with brick and mortar, that these are issues that are going to carry on to a new facility if the same management's left in place. But that's not entirely true. One, this is a staff-intensive building by its intrinsic design. That means the employees are spread thin, really thin. The other is that we're going to address the medical unit, have it more conducive, and then, of course, the mental health facility that we intend to build along with this new jail so that they're adequately addressed just upon booking and not trying to do a one-size-fits-all incarceration approach. So having said all that, any number of those things are going to have a huge positive impact on lessening these kind of issues, I feel certain. And then, of course, those that are going to be addressed, in an adequate way, we're in hopes that this also will limit their recidivism rate, so that maybe we won't see again and again as many repeat offenders that we have now, because we're going to address the root cause of the problem.
Okay, so you've been in behavioral health for a very long time.
Right.
Commissioner Mon really has led this effort in terms of going for the new building. Does what he says, is what he's saying, jive with the professionals and what the data says from in the field that you're in?
Well, a couple of things, and we've talked about this before. Still, it's preferable when we're able to divert people from jail settings and into treatment if they are appropriate candidates for that diversion, so that they never necessarily touch the jail. They're able to go straight into treatment. We've talked about that. We've had several guests on who have talked about that. But there are opportunities to provide services in a jail setting, and those services should be provided. You have individuals that are coming into the jail who may have a mental health issue, may have a substance use issue, but they aren't necessarily good candidates for diversion. There's something else going on, or their disease is not the primary root cause of why they are there. Still, you have to be able to provide treatment for these individuals while they're in that situation, or they can be unruly, or there can be other health complications. There are many things that can happen. So certainly, the population that they are dealing with, they need to be able to have these services available and be able to offer these services. Everything that I've heard about when we've talked to individuals who are delivering medical care within these facilities is that it is the current jail is a very difficult situation for that. It is not conducive to being able to provide the appropriate type of care, being able to provide the appropriate type of housing. So that's certainly an issue that we've heard many times over from the individuals that we've talked to on various issues. And you and I have done several interviews around criminal justice system and engagement in the opportunities that are there. I'm excited about the many opportunities that there are for diversion and for delivering treatment services, whether it's in a jail setting or outside of that jail setting. And I'm encouraged that the courts and the jail has been very receptive to looking for many different alternatives. But certainly with what he's talking about with facilities, we know this in behavioral health. You need a facility that meets the needs of the services that you're delivering. If you don't, it is a very difficult circumstance. It typically costs you more in the long run for having to retrofit areas for staffing demands that might arise from an area not being designed appropriately, equipment needs, and this is an area that is certainly advanced. When you really think of the advancement, not just in healthcare, but when you look at criminal justice, what's going on in jail settings, how the populations have changed, and the advancements that we have, it just makes sense that a newer system would be a better way to deliver those services.
Yeah, a lot of folks that we've talked to have said to me, they've just said the horse has left the barn. Okay.
Right.
Then the logical conclusion would be, if you defeat this bond issue, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, what does the future hold? And upon that point, talking about a segue, I asked that very question to Commissioner Mott.
But beyond that, I can tell you the number of organizations who have stepped forward to help pass it. You know, most of the local area chambers of commerce, different neighborhood of organizations. We've had different people from all walks of life in civic leadership endorse it. I think almost all the mayors in Oklahoma County have endorsed it, along with several city council members from the different municipalities. So it's a strong political coalition, which is rare that you see in an endeavor to try to, extend a bond, because each of those different governmental jurisdictions are also vying to get the voters to support bonds for their government entities. And so they understand and recognize how overall important this is. Public safety is a benefit to all of us.
And last question, with this report, considering if we go up on the assumption this was a legit, non-politically motivated sort of thing, if with this report, what does it say for the future if the jail bond is turned down? Would mean that building stays, and what kind of future is that?
Well, it stays, in these conditions that we constantly battle are going to remain. We, have done just about everything we can do with this existing structure. I've spent the bulk of the tenure I've spent in office working on that. I'm the most tenured commissioner, but the other previous commissioners worked alongside with me. The current two commissioners have worked alongside with me. This has been a huge effort with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Citizens Juvenile Advisory Board and the Justice Advisory Board. I mean, we have factored in everybody across the spectrum, anybody that you can possibly think of that may have some sort of connectivity, the clergy, the Bell Bondsman Association, all kinds of different ones who have some sort of a reason to walk in and out of that facility and try to work with a consensus. And this was the best plan we could come up with. The Oklahoman featured me a couple of weeks or a few days ago, rather, saying in the headline, there is no plan B. And I stress that all the time. There is no plan B. So I think the public should expect that a lot of what you've seen will continue if we don't get a new facility.
Okay, so no plan B. And if the building were, if this were, and Mon has been saying, this chance of a lifetime, if this doesn't happen now, I'm not really sure why we're still having the discussion when I think virtually every legitimate organization, respectable organization, and many who don't agree on much, okay, would agree with that, who don't agree on much else, say you got to do something about this right now. This can't continue.
Well, the commissioner's been very consistent with what he's been saying. I mean, these points that he's brought up, I've heard the discussions before, and he's stayed very consistent with what his message has been. Doesn't seem to be asking for anything excessive, but instead is looking for a new facility. And look at the communities around and near Oklahoma City, but around Oklahoma, with new jail settings in Cleveland County. We have a new jail here that made a huge difference with issues that were occurring previously in an old structure that just wasn't fit to meet our needs. Look at what's happened in Tulsa with expansion and different services over there and the opportunities that it's brought. So I think it's important that voters get as much credible information as they can, look and see what people have to say and pay attention to it. It's a big decision, but it's also a huge opportunity.
Okay, well, the voters get to have the say-so on that 27th. So we're going to keep on talking about it in terms of these developments. I respect everybody's viewpoint on this. It just seems like the consensus is from the folks that really have to deal with this, like my colleague here, that have to deal with the impact of this. The thing goes away, a new jail is not built, the people protesting, and a lot of the naysayers have to deal with it.
Mm.
Okay, man, that's just what it boils down to. Okay, we'll see what the folks say about that. Next, how long have you been dealing with media, Mr. Dismukes?
Since mid '80s.
Okay, and I started in the '80s. I think the reason I'm doing what I'm doing tonight probably goes back to watching Walter Cronkite and wanting to do this and going to journalism school, and have been involved in a lot of stories over the years. And we've broken stories on this program. We've broken stories on Your Vote Counts. We have the bedrock to our democracy is to have the ability to make decisions, good information, getting all the sides. Some people say we're in a post-truth environment where the truth doesn't matter anymore. And we're seeing a lot of polling that people are really hot and cold on media, as well as government and officials and parties and that sort of stuff. But for a few weeks, we've been talking about some of these things that have been happening with this investigation at tourism. Now, you know, the next meeting, Jeff, is going to be the 13th day of June, which is not long. That will be Representative Martinez. The Speaker McCall put this forward, this idea of a investigative committee. Happened really, really fast, had to do with tourism, had to do with the Foggy Bottom restaurants. And there were a couple of organizations really kind of led the way on this. And then I think I began to hear grumblings that, we may have strayed out of the journalism lane a little more into the advocacy lane. And that's for somebody else to decide, not me. I mean, I work with one you're going to meet in just a few minutes. You already know Storm Jones, these incredible journalists that are very straightforward in what they're saying. Sometimes the objects of those investigations don't like what they hear, but nonetheless, if it's just the facts, you're just putting it out there for people to decide. I know that's really a mantra now with Griffin companies, which is like, there's a great promotion right now that's running with Carl Torp. And he's like, you're getting so much information. We're just trying to put this out there. Well, my theory has always been, you need a lot of different sources to get to the truth, to find it somewhere. I know you feel the same way. You've got to make arguments about what your viewpoints are. And when you're trying to convince people, lawyers learn to make arguments first day in law school, right? Mm-hmm. So it was interesting as this thing has gotten very quiet, which was noted by Richard Morissette earlier today, which is there became this tourism situation. Also, there's been other situations around the governor where that there have been, he's received a lot of criticism. Now, we had Kyle Lovelace. I don't know if you were co-hosting that night a few weeks ago. For the governor's public standing right now, none of this seems to matter to the public. I mean, his viewpoint, or rather his approval rating, is very high right now. And there are some hot races around him. And it's always been, and I've been watching races since 1978, squirrely things often happen in reporting during election cycles. All right. And people are vying for the attention of journalists. And one of the guys that has been a real staunch critic of Republicans over the years is a former Your Vote Counts panelist, Richard Morissette, also, who is a practicing lawyer who does criminal law, he does civil law. And our conversations started a few weeks ago about this when he took a look. Nobody had really at that point taken a look at the contract that was out there, the contract between tourism and Swadley's. And he took a look at it, and he came back to me and he said, well, I don't see, I keep hearing about this crooked contract. I don't see anything in the contract that's crooked. Maybe something happened in terms of going beyond it. But nonetheless, he began to take notice. And a conversation over a couple of days has been, he goes, I'm really concerned about what we in the legal profession, we want to make sure that a person has a right to a fair hearing. And that's where laws of legal conduct come in, ABA 36 specifically, which is, in essence, you don't make statements about cases that could basically influence the jury pool or sway the jury pool or poison the jury pool, right? And he says, I'm having some difficulty in watching some of the reporting that's going on right now. It looks like it may have crossed over. And he goes, innocent until proven guilty is under attack. That's Richard's words, not mine. So just in the interest of conversation about what may be going on, we're not pointing any fingers at anybody. This is a conversation that's going to go on. There's a legislative hearing, which, unlike what happened to Frank Keating 25 years ago, appears to be, when Charles McCall calls for some hearings, he's basing them on that based upon the best evidence. And, so that's going to happen. Nonetheless, there are some people that are starting to raise some eyebrows about how this is being reported, even so far as naming these people in the scandal when they've not said anything, nor has anything been proven wrong at that point. You may recall, well, you don't recall, you're too young to remember this. One of the only thing that ever happened that helped Charlie Manson in his trial in 1970 when he sent those people in to kill Sharon Tate and those folks was a statement made by Richard Nixon when he said, Manson's guilty. And that was the entire defense at that time, was that the president of the United States had so poisoned the public opinion against Charles Manson, he couldn't get a fair trial. All right. So that's what this is all about. This is an interesting conversation with Richard Morissette, who's always controversial, but he raises some issues that I thought you might want to hear.
Well, again, I didn't see anything wrong in the contract. Now, I imagine there was an addendum. Apparently, I have not seen the addendum. But this is typical, Scott. It's much easier to convict people in the press, rush to judgment, because it makes for great headlines and great opening on the 10 o'clock television news. But what we find out in time is that the truth is a far more difficult matter. When you and I were young people, journalism had some respect for its own ethics to find out some semblance of what the truth was on both sides. I don't know if Swadley has committed anything wrong, but one of the things I just thought of is that somebody had better be careful about slander or libel, because apparently Swadley has suffered some economic losses based on these accusations. And if these accusations turn out to be false, they may have a civil lawsuit of libel or slander against these institutions and possibly the government, leading all the way up to the governor's office, because they were a little loose with their tongue before they found out what the facts were. This is a country where you're presumed innocent, right? Probable cause, due process. Where is the grand jury investigation, by the way? If this is so critical, why hasn't the attorney general or whoever asked for an immediate grand jury investigation, the Oklahoma County grand jury, the statewide grand jury, to get to the bottom? Well, I suspect it's politics, Scott. Can you believe that?
Can, but
there's a primary coming up. I contend
in 3 weeks.
problem rests in the governor's doorstep. And he doesn't want any of this coming out because he's in a heated primary at the end of this month. Have you noticed that this story has gone underground, basically?
It's gotten very quiet, but I think they're still,
in any manner,
they're still phrasing it. A lot of people are phrasing it as calling it the Swadley's scandal. And I remember over time, you've got to be careful about, I know the Ray Donovan story. Remember the Reagan's secretary of, I believe he was secretary of transportation or something. And he was convicted. He was a bad guy. Then he went to court, had his time, and he won and came back out and walked out onto the courthouse lawn and said to the media, now, where do I get my reputation back?
Exactly. And that, I think people are walking on thin ice here about the Swadley matter. Again, I think you were the one that told me that they have already suffered some serious financial hardship over this. And the man hasn't been accused of anything. I mean, he hasn't been charged with anything. Excuse me. He's been accused. He's been convicted in the press. But again, no charges have been filed. Nothing. Has there been a civil suit filed? I don't know. Has there been, Scott?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't really know. I mean, most people that have reached out to me have just said it's the way it's being phrased that appears to be designed for a campaign.
I predict that this whole thing is going to go underground. It's going to get swept over, and in time, it's going to drift in the wind like smoke in the wind, and nothing will ever come of this. How do you like that for a prediction?
Well, it's happened before. I mean, when you go back to Governor Keating, I don't remember when exactly you came in the legislature, but there was a Tulsa man. He's now gone to his reward, eternal reward. Tom Clark, who sold a plane to Governor Keating and was just caught in the middle of a nonsense deal, and they went after him. And after the inquiry went away, as you said, just went away, the next year he was unanimously sent to the OU regents by the state Senate, who were the ones who were after him the year before. It happens.
Yet at the same time, let's go back to the David Walters scandal. I mean, they went after him with a vengeance because remember, the opposition party was in control of some things, the U.S. Attorney's Office at the time. And so they made a big deal out of it. The thing that makes Swadley sort of lucky here is that his own people are in charge of the jailhouse door. The governor's a Republican, the attorney general's a Republican, the legislature's Republican, and he's a Republican friend. So the chances are, unless somebody gets a burr up their backside, Scott, this situation is just going to blow away in the wind. It's just going to drift away, and it's the last we've heard of it.
All right, so the final question, are you at all concerned about what you're seeing in terms of the rush to judgment on a private individual and his business in Oklahoma or any place else? Are you seeing any trends that disturb you?
Well, they certainly are. Journalism has lost its code of ethics. Of course, there was a day when, we heard this all the time, Walter Cronkite at night, and we get the newspaper in the afternoon. I mean, in the mornings and maybe sometimes in the afternoons, and that was it. But with 24/7 cable and 24/7 internet access and Facebook and all of that, there is no journalism ethics because there isn't journalism anymore because anybody can become a publisher and a journalist in an instant, correct? So we just make wild accusations. But the Swadleys have been damaged economically. So my suspicion is that if they're found that there's nothing there and they didn't violate the contract or et cetera, somebody may be liable that may be involved in a libel or slander suit against their entity because they have suffered economic losses based on these accusations prior to any criminal investigation, any lengthy criminal investigation, or even charges being filed.
I do have to differ with you on. I do think there are journalism ethics. I just don't think everybody plays by the same rules.
Okay, I'll agree with that. You're right. Your comment is more accurate than mine. But with this day and age, and you've seen it both in the print media and in the television media. It's much easier to throw out conclusions of guilt or wrongdoing than it is to actually find out some facts before you start reporting on a controversial story.
Well, as always, you're controversial, but that's why we enjoy you so much. Okay?
Is the truth controversial? Is bringing to light the reality of what's really going on instead of political spin or the spin to cover things up? I suspect the Swadleys have good legal representation. That's why you're not hearing anything from them, which is extremely wise, by the way. You remain silent. Saying anything only hurts you. So in that sense, he's being well represented.
Interesting, huh? I mean, interesting thoughts on that, which is, no, the Swadleys have not been heard from publicly. So you know, when in the absence of other information, people start drawing their own conclusions, and that can be dangerous. And as he pointed out, there is not guilty or the presumption of innocence just seems to have suffered somewhat in this. And I've seen this before. I said all the way back to the 90s with Keating. Occasionally you will get yourself an actor or two that want to move from just reporting the facts to more opinion and commentary than just straight fact reporting. So anyway, to each his own. I mean, basically, if that's the sort of stuff that sells, we know there's one network in this country that absolutely hardly ever tells the truth, and you know, just unbelievable ratings. So that's, again, to each his own. But at this particular point, I think there are some people who are starting to look at this and going, there was maybe a little overzealous to start naming diseases after people until you figure out if they're responsible for it. So anyway, I thank Richard for that. I think that's something to look forward to. And I do recall going all the way back, by the way, to another attorney 3 weeks ago, who's the majority floor leader, who reminded everybody from the get-go, there's been no allegation. There's nobody proven anything yet.
Right.
So chill your roll there. Okay. Next, we had the last story of our day is, before one quick little feature, is that the federal judge finally made his ruling on that trial that bench trial that was held a few weeks ago dealing with the cocktail. It came out today. The execution cocktail was ruled okay, or however the words were, exactly by the federal judge. Storm Jones was on this story. Here's a real quick reminder of what happened today. It's been a couple of months, I think, since you were covering that federal trial. Do we call it a trial?
Yeah, it was 6 days. It was a bench trial, but 6 days of testimony, about 40 hours of testimony over 6 days, right at the beginning of March.
And we got the answer today. So executions are going to move forward. Just walk us through what this means. How it. First off, you called it. You said, I really don't see him ending this. You had lots of reasons we talked about at the time, but here we are today. And now what happens in Oklahoma?
Well, this is a trial that's been on federal judge Stephen Fry's desk since 2014, that is. And so it finally made it through the process, the appeals to try to stop it, the preliminary injunctions, finally made it through. And I think they started with 34 death row inmates maybe challenging the state's execution protocol. And by the time they actually got to trial, it was 28. But basically, these 28 folks on death row say the state's 3-drug cocktail is cruel and unusual punishments. Now, there's 10 different arguments inside that. But basically, they say, the first drug is supposed to make the person insensate to pain. The second drug makes them where they can't move. It's a paralytic. And then the third drug stops the prisoner's heart. Now, their primary argument was against a drug called midazolam. That's the first drug. And they say it doesn't actually make the prisoner insensate to pain. So if that first drug doesn't work, but the second drug paralyzes them, then they're going to be in extreme pain and suffering by the time the third drug, potassium chloride, gets to their heart. That would be an extremely painful experience, they say. So we had this bench trial in front of the judge, and he wasn't convinced on any of those arguments. He says midazolam, he believes it quickly renders these inmates insensate to pain. Now, something that I thought was interesting, and he issued a 43-page finding of facts and conclusions of law. So basically, there was a 4-page, deny, but then he kind of goes back and walks you through it and kind of organizes his thoughts and lets you know how he's thinking, which is very interesting because Judge Fry is a very stoic guy, but charismatic. Whenever he's got something on his mind, he has a way of putting it that is interesting. So in this trial, the prisoners brought in experts saying this drug doesn't work. The state brought in experts saying it does work. Each step of the way, there were just studies books on books on books and witnesses, experts on experts on experts contradicting each other. And the judge notes this. And I wanted to read a part of Judge Frye's ruling here. It says, it's appropriate here to comment briefly on the battle of the experts in this case. Rarely in any field of litigation does a court see and hear well-qualified expert witnesses giving expert testimony as squarely and empathetically contradictory on the issues at the heart of the matter in this case. Some of the opposing experts in the case have squared off in other midazolam, that's the first drug, challenges in other courts across the country in what amounts to a midazolam roadshow, the judge says. On the whole, the results of those cases have been not favorable to the inmates awaiting execution. The judge goes on to say there is one fresh face in this case, and a credible one at that. That is Dr. Irvin Yin, a practicing anesthesiologist who has administered midazolam and observed its effects thousands of times. So I think folks involved in politics know Dr. Irvin Yin, state senator, now running for governor as an independent. But he was one of those folks that walk in the room and you're like, whoa, I didn't know that he had been witnessing some of the same execution that I had witnessed, for example. So that was the expert witness that kind of solidified things for the judge, which was interesting to me.
It is interesting. You just coined a phrase, a charismatic stoic.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
So, okay, well, listen, you never can tell when something's going to catch on, right? So stoicism is really a hot topic right now. You go on YouTube and learn how a lot of people use stoicism and study this. We've got Colin Walkie, Representative Walkie, out teaching mindfulness. He's got a book out, by the way. And I would say, based upon your analysis, that Irvin Yin is basically a charismatic stoic. It would apply to him as well.
Okay.
I mean, he's, by the way, you know what, he knows as much about anesthesiology as anybody, and that's rock and roll. I mean, the guy he knows guitar players and goes around and sees concert. He's an incredible, interesting human being. Okay.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. By charismatic stoic, it's like these are very intellectual, thoughtful people that aren't necessarily always shouting. But when they get on something, they're wordsmiths they cut and whip and you're like, wow, I get what you're saying. I got it. And I think the judge had a way of kind of capsulating, like I said, I mean, it was just hours and hours and hours. By the way, Judge Frye, I had it down. He's close to 80 years old if he isn't already. And this guy was sharp as a tack, on microbiology. And when it gets down to whether these drugs work or not, it's really like GABA receptors and can get too much drug that it saturates the receptor and it doesn't work anymore. But anyway, that was one part that stood out to me today, in that the judge was convinced by Dr. Yin. Now you ask, what does this mean? So now with the addition of the convicted cop killer in Tulsa, there are 43 folks on death row. 28 of them have exhausted their appeals and are eligible to be executed. Now, they're eligible for an execution date to be set. We anticipate that AG O'Connor will ask the Court of Criminal Appeals for those dates. They're the ones that actually put it on the calendar. They kind of acknowledge that there's no more appeals. That's kind of their role in this. But, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this week he was asking for those dates to be set. And so the DOC says they can execute someone every 3 weeks with 3 weeks space between them. So we're looking at regularly scheduled executions every 3 weeks for the next 2 years, with 28 folks currently eligible.
Good gosh almighty. Can you imagine that number?
Wow.
Every 3 weeks for 2 years. By the way, did you enjoy that? Storm's maybe my favorite reporter. And yes. Augusta is probably my favorite. But Storm's right up there. So Storm, he's just fascinated by a guy almost 80 being sharp as a tack. And I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, I'm closer to
I know. I'm
Judge Frye's age than his. So you just imagine at the end of the day, he's going, can you believe Mitchell knows how to sign on and off? Holy cow, he's sharp as a tack. It's amazing. It's amazing. By the way, he wasn't working that. I mean, he did the story this morning because he's now in the 4 a.m.,
Right.
which means, folks, you see Storm on here. It's a favor now because that alarm goes off now at 2:15. Okay?
Unreal.
So it's kind of like Herms and Doherty, my buddies who Detroit and Boston, respectively. So,
So you need
Storm
to do a
Jones
show
got a
on
great
that.
future.
We need to do a
Yeah.
show on talking about what the morning crew goes through, and
It's
that would be
absolutely would be a
interesting.
good one.
Yeah,
Herms
it's
is in
amazing.
Detroit, Michigan. Michigan. You talk about an interesting state right now. Woo.
Oh yeah, yeah. He has some
Yeah.
great stuff going on there right now.
Yeah. There is some stuff out of the ordinary, shall we say.
Yep.
All right, so that's the state of that. And so here we come. You've got the Glossop case will be right back out there.
Mhm.
And you know what? He told me how many people Storm had interviewed, including Dr. Phil. I mean, all these people, all these celebrities.
Mhm.
So, of course, we had the situation. We had the campaign last year for Julius Jones. Still, people believe he's innocent and want him off death row, or he's not on death row anymore. He's
Right.
commuted by the governor to life in prison. And then the Glossop case, and then there's a whole bunch more. So, to be announced. Anyway, we got one more little piece we want to play for you in just a second, which is the close your eyes piece here in just a moment. But in terms of the death penalty, the trauma that families go through in a situation like that, you ever dealt with any of that?
As far as
Either side.
well, no, not really. I take that back. I've friends, family that had to deal with that. I've certainly talked to many people who have been close to that type of issue, and in sentencing and in court cases, and from a family standpoint of having lost someone, a victim. Yeah, it's difficult and very difficult on the families. I don't think people understand that part of it, how difficult it is there.
So lots more on that coming up. All right, today is June the 6th, which has always been something that I've tried to remember in my heart and actions each June the 6th. I know that my mother is a Smith and my dad is a Mitchell, and there are Mitchells and Smiths that gave their life. Several of them were aviator trainers, died, and so many kids died in airplanes just training for the missions in the United States. There's a Mitchell, my dad's uncle, who went down in the Mediterranean, was part of one of the bomber crews, think a tail gunner. Obie Mitchell, Blanchard, Oklahoma, who he has a what do they call the grave that they were not really there? Cenotaph, is that how you pronounce that in terms of markers and in graveyards, that sort of thing? But anyway, so it's June 6th, and it's the day that it was Erwin Rommel, General Rommel, who said that this it will be the longest day for all
Right.
sides. And then that's the movie that I grew up with. I learned so much from that in terms of the longest day. That had John Wayne and Stuart Whitman and Sean Connery and Henry Fonda, and the list goes on and on.
Watched it this weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, for my kids' generation, they Saving Private Ryan, Matt Damon, Tom Hanks, and all those folks. Okay. So we're going to do just one quick little thing going out the door as a tribute. And this is one of those where you just have to kind of close your eyes, because people were listening to the radio back then. It wasn't something that was you weren't going to be able to see pictures, or there's no television at this time. This is brought to us by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. It's a little explainer about D-Day. And we're going to bring it up, put it up right now.
The Atlantic Wall has been penetrated. There, after the first assault, the Allies clung precariously to a few beaches. But now they have a solid foothold on Fortress Europa. Men and material have poured onto the newly won beachhead.
end well, so it cut off too soon. But anyway,
Did we lose it?
We lost it. So it was from them. It's, by the way, you can go to the United States Holocaust Memorial. There are quite a few audio and videos there. Sorry about that. That was one of those technical things that happens in the middle. But there are so many of those. You can go find them on YouTube. You can find a lot of those guys that later became mainstays with CBS News.
Yeah.
That were there in London reporting back to the United States at the time. And anyway, so the world changed June the 6th, 1944. And we look across the pond today and we look right into the area of Ukraine. And the only thing we don't know about history is, as Truman said, the only thing we don't know is a history we haven't read yet. And this happens. And it's just awful what's happening to those people over there. But it's, that raid, when they went into Ukraine, it's no different than Hitler went into Belgium and France and all those places, with one exception. Ukrainian people put up a magnificent fight against tyranny. And anyway, you don't like to use the term because it's used so many times without much feeling, but our thoughts and prayers are with those people over there. And it's great to contribute to anything you can to help the Ukrainians. And I'm proud, by the way, of the Congress. I'm proud of the president, folks here who have been doing what they can to help those folks out there. So remembering Ukraine today on June the 6th, and hopefully pray to God 1 year from now, it will all be behind us and they'll be victorious. Their country will be back. But there's been a lot of heartbreak there. Okay. Well, that's everything we have for you tonight. Sorry we couldn't get the whole D-Day memorial there for you. We'll go ahead and post it on Mitchell Talks so you can have a look for yourself a little bit later. Well, thanks to everyone tonight, Commissioner Mon, Richard Morissette, Storm Jones, and Jeff Dismukes, all the folks at the Oklahoma State Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. We are going to work on that acronym one day. And thanks to folks back News 9 News on 6. By the way, I was having some fun with Storm earlier. The Thursday night, you're going to be seeing the debate, the Republican United States Senate debate. During that, on Mitchell Talks, starting about a half an hour before the debate, I believe I'll be joined by Jason Duncan and John Eccles, and we're going to do like Coach's Cabana or the Manning brothers. We're going to be on before the debate. We're going to be on during the debate. We'll be watching the debate from our respective places, making comments. If Amanda lines up a great shot and takes it, we'll cheer, right? Or if somebody makes an answer and Jason Duncan goes, he avoided it. I mean, we're going to have some fun with this because, there's a lot of people over the years have thought sometimes you got to have a little fun with this. Debates tend to be so super serious and so much funny stuff happens. Flies land on people's heads in all the debates. And what did they talk about after that debate?
Flies
sure
landing
wasn't
on
anything
head.
else. Flies landing on heads. So we're going to do that. That's 6:30 Mitchell Talks. Think we'll be back Wednesday night at 7. I have a sneaking suspicion that America's Doctor will be hosting that night. If not, it'll be Jeff and me. So from everyone at Mitchell Talks, News 9 News on 6, and for Jeff Dismukes, have a great evening, everyone. See you soon.